Sick, dude. Yeah. Yeah, see those little lines, just the little, yeah, man. That is that's what I want to do. That's so cool. All right, hey, I'm Jay, and this is Pixel Peeping, where we get to take a deep dive and a closer look at some of today's best artists' work. Today with me is Pablo Munoz, aka Pablender. Pablo is a digital artist and educator. He's using primarily Zbrush. He does 3D modeling, conceptual design, and illustration. He's been a fixture in the Zbrush community for years and has created many useful guides and brushes and materials that are widely used in the community. He's founded multiple websites, including ZBrushGuides.com. He can often be seen streaming on the official ZBrush YouTube channel, as well as his own, and he might be the godfather of the graphic rendering style in ZBrush. So welcome, Pablo. Thanks, dude, for doing this.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for that awesome introduction. I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, so I've been doing everything that you mentioned, a little bit of everything for a while. And so hopefully today I can show you and everyone watching a bit of the behind the scenes of one of my recent pieces where I use the comic style material that I've shared before. I just did a kind of like an upgrade to it. So now it works nicely with Polypaint in ZBrush. So yeah, hopefully you can get something out of this.
Awesome, dude. Yeah. So I'm super stoked to talk about this because at least I think of you as like the godfather of this, because I've reached out to some people that do some standout work and they all credit you and your guide that you made a long time ago. Like this whole like graphing rendering style, which we're about to get into. I mean, I've got a couple of your images up right now too, like the Harvester's image, which looks great. And then you've got some more recent ones too that you've been playing around with, Ethernus, which I think you even played with different styles. So they're all like slightly different even too. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some other examples from stuff that people have done where just like the texture, the line quality. It's just something that I'm really unfamiliar with. And I want to learn more. So I'm stoked that we have you here now, dude, and we can talk about it. So maybe we can pull up your work now. Yeah. And take a close look at that. And then I'm sure I'm just going to have some questions.
Yeah, so obviously this is ZBrush with my own UI, and partly like I use this UI for most of the stuff, but if you look here at the bottom, I do have the comic material ready, and I have a couple more that I actually developed recently. But this interface, I use it for everything. The tools that I have already here, they help me test things as I go for that specific stylization. So it's kind of like cool to have it, even if it is not something like a comic style, I still like to test things out. With the material, it looks pretty cool. Ooh. So this is the final model. It is still very sketchy. As a level of polish is pretty basic. So let me just isolate this bit. And I think this one is still this is a Dynamesh of 1 million polygons. That's all this is. But see, if you want to actually create the pores, I try to avoid that, like doing that for this specific style, because it looks very, very messy when you get to that stage. Only it's like a close-up. And ultimately, you're working with a matcap, right? So let me show you something cool so that we can kick this off with like something exciting, and then we'll just break it down. So this is another thing, by the way, that I tend to do with the comic style render. I just build like a quick cam view with the comic style. So it's kind of like a tiny illustration here at the top. And then I have the thumbnail here. And, this is great for anything, not just for this comic style, to keep an eye on the silhouette and proportions and all of that. So I use this quite a bit. And I don't know if you knew, but you can just click and drag it to just change the size.
No, I did not know this.
It's pretty cool. So if I just go ahead and do a quick render right now, and this is not even the final rendering project, you get all the line qualities and details.
Sick,
and all of that.
Dude. Yeah. See those little lines, just the little, yeah, man, that is, that's what I want to do. That's so cool. What you were saying, so it kind of makes sense now too, that like keeping it low res and keeping it Dynamesh and, embracing the sketchiness helps, because imperfections is a huge part of this, like you want like little, like you want it to look like it's drawn by hand. Yeah, I want to know how to do all those little lines on the head. And also, do you have like a pretty good idea of what can make some of these, or is there a lot of randomness happening that you're embracing, or in some cases are you like trying to make particular effects?
That's a good question. I suppose I have already a good idea what I'm aiming for. So when I start doing this, I kind of like know what I want to create but a lot of it is experimentation. For instance, if I want to, get these sharp lines here for the kind of like the pectoral area, like this plate here, I know what I need to sculpt at least to get those. And then for the tiny little kind of like the hashing lines, and I kind of like use it as a way to create visual interest, but at the same time indicate where there might be shadows. And I'll show you how simple this is. If I just go to render, let's just make this full. So full strength here in the shadows, the G strength or global shadow strength, it looks more like a comic or inking render. This is the material that I will share around, so you guys can do like anything with this.
Cool.
In this material, I can push this in the first slot. You can push the diffuse quite a bit, and that kind of like overexposed. You'll see the difference. Yeah, so now the shadows are like a bit sharper. But yeah, this is the idea. Anyway, this is not the final bit. So to answer your question about the details, those are sculpted details. So if I select, let's say, this plate, I'm just gonna select a brush that you guys probably have access to. Let's filter by S. I'll use the /3 and a tiny, maybe increase this up, the intensity. So this is the quality level. So you see this, it's pretty rough. I think I have subdivisions on this particular piece, but if I switch to the comics, this is the type of thing that I can do. And right now I'm not using my pen, so let me just do that. So this is what I do once I get to that stage. I start like literally painting in those bits, and that's how I create all of those lines. A lot of them are just pure sketched in or sculpted in, and therefore sketch. So that's how I reach that kind of like level of detail. But the behind the scenes really is that this is pretty shoddy in terms of the sculpture.
I mean, that's good to hear that it's kind of relatively quick and like you can get a feel for it, but it's also, I don't know, maybe a little bit of surprise that you hand make everything. I mean, there's magic happening, but it's very like curated, it's not random, which is cool. That means like also it's more effort from you and everything, but then you could move the light around, you could move the camera around, and you've already put like where you want these things to be. But yeah, it's kind of, it's cool to see it without the filter, so you can really see. I mean, it really comes to life once you render it.
That's the thing, right? Like once you have it at this stage, then you can go for more automated stuff. So let me just show you the final illustration that probably gives you an idea of the difference between what it looks here in Zbrush and the final render. So yeah, this is kind of like the style that I like to produce. I have like big influences of the comic style that I really like Modifiers type of stuff. So that's what I try to do, and I like the print quality, like the dirtiness of it, things like those little dots and all of that. I can achieve all of these with filters in Zbrush, but I also do a pass in Photoshop. So if I get closer, see all these dots and all this extra texture, that's all from Zbrush. But these elements here, and all of this stuff, it's coming from Zbrush, but it's not detailed in. So it's not like the manual thing that you were talking about. So the more manual stuff is kind of like these lines that I want them to be there regardless of the angle. So I don't want them to change that much when I change the camera.
Okay, but some of this other stuff, is that like the filters for like and you're doing it in the shadows or something like that?
Yeah. Let's do that, because that's kind of cool. That was the kind of like the thing that I did originally with this material. So this is like the third time that I edited, and it's still available online, the second version. The third one will be soon. That's kind of like what I try to do. Like I created this material that is a matcap based material, but it also has shaders in it, so it reacts to the light, and it has these 4 elements in here. So if I just turn them all off, right? So this is the first one, and this is the base material that I use to grab the lighting. So if I change the light, it will react to it. So just this bit is quite good to just get a clean, consistent lighting. So I can just do that and leave it like that. This is something as well, like pretty cool, just to test the volumes and shapes and see how everything is working. Like using this bit, I can sort of like test how deep the lines that I'm cutting, let's say in the head of that seahorse thing, are. It's kind of like a bandana or something that is wearing. I can see how much of that sculpted detail is being carried from the render. So yeah, I can just move this around and test this out. So that's the first shader. The second one is already a matcap, and it's using like a mid-gray texture, but that's the one that grabs all the cavities, right? By the way, this is kind of like what I break down step by step in that comic style guide, but just in a quick overview. So this one is just grabbing all those details, and it's thanks to this shader that I can do this type of stuff, just literally painting and adding those details. So those are the manual details. The third one is already a matte cap that gives me a thicker line, right? So this one is literally an image.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this is a matte cap of a top down or something?
Yeah, that's a matte cap, and that's the one that gives me like those deep shadows, and it helps me variate that line depending on the angle, obviously. Right? Yeah. You see, it gives me the outline and it gives me that thick line. But I don't have to use it. The fourth one gives me the full outline.
Oh.
I guess the main difference is you can have the third one on or off, and it just gives you that sort of thick outline. So yeah, it's just a mix. So what's cool about this third matte cap, because it is a matte cap, you can change the depth in the modifiers of this tool. So right now it's set at 5, but you can set it to 1, and that just makes things.
Oh, then you got more than one value.
Yeah, you can just go further. And what Zbrush is doing literally is taking this image and it's just pinching it. You see the result here up top. So the highlight gets reduced. Or you can do it the other way around. So, -1. Yeah, and you'll have to have depth A and B at the same level. Otherwise, you get like, which you can also do. You can have like kind of like 2 shading, right? So you have this deep one and this one. So the third matte cap here is really powerful for this comic style. You can even change it all together. So if you have like A and B for lots of these things, intensity A and B, you can change the intensity of just A or just B. So I can just override that sort of like second shader or make it like, darker. Yeah, so it's lots of things to play around with.
Yeah, wow. That's cool to see how you make the line. That's more than I thought. Should I not admit that I've never used like more than S1? I didn't know that. I didn't even know that the multiple S's are stacking. So
yeah, you can do like crazy stuff with the materials, but you don't have to really use them. For me, it works, and it just gives me kind of like a greater degree of control when I can split things up.
Yeah.
And you can do the same thing in normal shaders. You can have one that is just like the base material and another one that is just the highlights. So you can play around with the like changing the speculars individually. But like this one right here.
Okay. Oh, dang. What?
Yeah. So this is another one. But what I was gonna say is that this is a single one. Right, so to your point, this is only one S. So you can still get like pretty cool stuff in just one. It's just the convenience of being able to break it down into 4, is splitting up the effect in 4 so you can control it separately. So that's, I think, the cool stuff.
Yeah, exactly. No, for sure. Being able to control all those individual aspects, I think, is huge. Yeah, then you're not just like throwing a material on and what you get is what you get. There's still like creative control and input that you can have to make your image.
But yeah, that's kind of like the thing. I don't know if you want to see a little bit more of the process of the other type of line, kind of like the filtering thing.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to ask about the filter. So I know you can do a lot with that, I think, right? There's an artist I've seen that it looks like he does pointillism. I assume he's using filters. I don't know. It looks like filters are a whole nother thing.
To me, the way that I see it is this is like finishing your project or like almost finishing it like you would in Photoshop. So you have like similar tools like blending modes, things like that. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, you can get a good feel of like the filters. The cool thing about the filters in Zbrush is that obviously you have the 3D aspect of it that you can you can use. So you have like the Fresnel effect, you have the the deep shadows, you have the depth, and you can filter by those 3D properties that you don't get in Photoshop. So that's the cool thing.
You can make like hash marks in the shadow, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Well, you can make hash like the hash marks anywhere and then use the shadow as, tell Zbrush, I want to use the shadows to only show the hash in there. But the same effect can be applied to anything. It's not like just making it for the shadows. You just make it in general, and then you can tell Zbrush, just put it in the shadows or just put it in the, in the edges. And that's kind of like what I did.
Okay.
Maybe while we chat, I'm just gonna open up the render project because that takes a while.
Oh man, the little tiny thin lines on the head.
Yeah,
little lines.
I'm sure it's the same for you when you're doing like the detailing of like those really cool characters you do. The female characters and stuff like that, and you're doing all the pores and everything. Once you have the primary and secondary shapes, those details are kind of like relaxing. You just sit down and just do it by hand and spend time doing it. For me, it's the same with this type of style. You have the bases ready, you have most of the stuff ready, and then the rest is like just kind of like caressing the model, doing those details. The only thing that I would say though is that it's important to, for me at least, is to keep an eye on the big picture, because it is so easy to do this and overdoing them that if you do a lot, like I said, like doing pores, it will look messy.
Absolutely. Yeah, finding a balance would be a big trick to it. Also the different kinds of shapes and where to put them. But like for me, like just like you said about adding the detail to characters, like it's kind of the icing on top that just makes everything pop. Like, is it lost on you, or is that at all like, is that one of your favorite parts, or are you just like, okay, adding the thin lines now?
I think that's what separates, like a sketch. I mean, this is, even though this is sketchy, it's not like I wouldn't use this in like a hyper realistic render or anything. That's what separates the sketch or the idea from the polished version of the illustration or the sketch. So those little markings, and it is the same thing for I guess adding pores and all of that, like adding this stuff. So
that's like the finishing touch. That makes sense, because that's how it feels. It feels like something's done and really nice. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of like some of Dave Raposa's work, and he spent a long time coming up with a style that looks really nice and that he can do in a short enough amount of time. And he's great at adding these little lines.
But yeah, like you said, it's the icing on top. I think it's just polishing things up a bit, but this is kind of like what I was saying, just adding this type of details like pores, which is something that again I would spend a lot more time in it. When you have lots of these, and you see what I mean, when you turn into the comic render, it looks messy. Like it doesn't have that quality of that's one of the key things, like to avoid detailing like too much and keep things clean. That actually helps a lot. So I'm gonna do all of that.
I mean, even on this face, these tiny little lines on the nose and the chin and everything, it's awesome.
Yeah, and if you see the model is like, it's something that you would do maybe like to sketch out or to quickly define where you're going to actually sculpt things. But in this case, you don't need to sculpt them. Let ZBrush know where you want to have like a nice set of details. Yeah, you can also paint them as well. Like you don't have to affect the model. You can keep things like super clean and just literally use like this, the standard brush and paint it with black. I think I have some brushes for that, but yeah.
Scott, I wanted to ask you your kind of take on, are you using ZBrush to make this kind of style because you're comfortable with ZBrush, or in your opinion, is there some like real benefits and strengths that you like about it? Because I know you play around with Blender and other programs that also I've seen great, different kinds of graphic style renderings, but you in particular have used ZBrush. So I'm just curious, like, what your opinion or take is on that.
So, and we're talking about this specific style or in general?
Like this project, for instance, like when you set out and you have this idea for this work and you want to do it in this style, what is the reason that you're using ZBrush? And do you even think that is the best choice?
Yeah, I think a few things. The first one is just because I'm comfortable with it. I can produce this in like a quarter of a time, or the same time that I would spend in other software maybe. Because I'm comfortable with the tools. I know how to make it look the way that I want to a degree. The other thing is ZBrush has the tools to check things as you go. You could set up things in ZBrush and then send them to Unreal or to Blender or any other renderer, for example, just to test things out. You can do really cool shading effects in Blender and that sort of stuff. The testing is something that I spend a lot of time doing, and I do that in ZBrush. So I just test things around. So I find that really helpful and easy to do in ZBrush. But yeah, and other than that, I think, what you see is what you get in this type of style. So if I like this one, or if I like this render or this side, I just take a screenshot and do a quick test, in Photoshop, and then just come back to it. To answer your question more concretely, it's I feel comfortable with it.
I do a lot of stuff in ZBrush that isn't optimal because I'm comfortable with it, but what you said about, the fact that you can just reach out, like in the examples, you're like, I'm just going to make some lines right here. And you can see that final result pretty quickly. So you're making the model, you're doing the painting, you're doing the rendering all very quickly. Makes a lot of sense, especially as you say, like if you're comfortable sculpting in ZBrush, why not? So
I would say it's the same for any other software. Like I'm really comfortable with just Photoshop, so I will just go to Photoshop. It's the same thing, the same feeling I get with ZBrush, I suppose.
I mean, the results that you're getting though are great. I mean, I think anybody would I'd be stoked if I got it. And like the first time I saw like the Harvester work, I didn't think it was ZBrush,
Right.
And it was hard for me. It hurt my brain. You did some other ones too, like some landscapes, right? There was like some alien landscapes. It might have even been included in like the drop when ZBrush announced it. Yeah, and it didn't look like ZBrush.
And it was one of the ones that kind of like kick-started the whole thing of comic for me. This one is heavily edited in Photoshop. You know, all the shadows and all the 3D-ness of it, it's all from ZBrush. This is the mesh, literally. So you can see it's pretty low res, clean surfaces. This was way before the filter stuff. This was just matcap based. I think I did this one before 2018.
So this is just matcaps.
Just matcap, yeah.
Wow. Well, the work I was thinking of was Reverence. I just pulled it up. When I saw Reverence, I was like, oh, damn. Because like that just straight up looks like a drawing.
That one is making use, playing around with the filters. So if you want, let's just jump into that and I'll show you what that looks like.
Let's do that.
This is the final version. I like to play around with this type of stuff. So as if it is like the the cover of a comic.
Yeah.
And then I just make it like all star. So this is like
cool.
I do this type of mockups.
Yeah, dude.
Because that's what I love about doing this. Yeah. So these are literally the passes that I use, or the render passes from ZBrush that I use to build the final look.
How are you getting these individual passes out? Are you unchecking the S numbers like you showed, or are you doing it purely with BPR?
I do multiple passes, and sometimes I do more than what I actually use, just because when I get to compositing, I like to have them ready. But one of the cool things about the new or the updated version of the shader that I'm gonna share is the fact that it works with polypaint. So this is the polypaint. If I switch to flat, this is how it looks, and this is the base that I use. So I use this color in the final render. You see, it's pretty close. And then I just kind of like blend it a little bit in Photoshop. It does have like a manual process of tweaking it and refining it as a 2D illustration, but everything comes from ZBrush almost like as it is. So it's just the lines and the color, everything like that. So I separate it, and this is the same concept that we were just talking about, having different kind of like slots in the material. I like to have every pass separately, so I have more control over it. So I would render something that looks like this, right, with a white background. So I would render this, and then I would do the same thing, but with polypaint and turning off the line, and would render this and then just combine them in Photoshop. And then that way I can just mess with the color and not affect the lines. In here, what I have really are, so I have the depth map from ZBrush from my PPR. This one I use it for a bunch of stuff. I use it to relight things in the final presentation, just like of the comic. I can just choose like a specific gray and then just relight it a little bit, or just simply to fade it a bit, like the color, and add a bit of atmosphere. So this is the quality of the line that I get from this. So this is the same material, but with the third matcap turned off. So I don't have those harsh lines or harsh shadows. So that's what I have here. So it's almost the same thing. Then I render another one. Oh, this is from the normal rendering ZBrush. So this is just the shadow pass. Yeah. So I just grabbed this one, the shadow. So that's that. And then I did another one with the third matcap. So this is exactly the same thing as this, but with the third matcap enabled. And I think I tweaked the second matcap cavities. Even though it is a preset and the material is there and I can just drop it into any model and it should work by default, I always tweak it depending on the project. So in this case, for what I wanted to achieve, I think I went into the material, and in the second one that deals with the cavity, so if I remove the cavity, you don't get any details. So I changed the transition, the cavity transition, to get even more of these details or less.
Oh, wow.
You can get really cool, funky stuff just with a one slider. So yeah, I tweaked this a little bit. I can't remember the numbers, but you'll see it in the final anyway. I set this one to multiply, but if I turn this on and off, maybe the one at the bottom, you see a tiny difference. But anyway, the one that I use for the final is this one, right? But sometimes I like to have this one as an individual pass so that I can bring in more details, because in this case, I was overriding too many things and I just wanted to bring in some details. But yeah, that's about it.
But pick and choose where.
That's right. Or you can just use that one with the shadows, and it should give you pretty similar stuff, right? So this is just the shadow pass on top. The cool ones that give you all these effects right here are these ones. So I have this effect, and this is just purely filters in Photoshop. In ZBrush. And this is the one that I end up using.
Yeah, so can you show us that? there was a different pattern, right?
Yeah. So the other pattern, I didn't end up using it, but it has like these hatch lines, which sometimes I use to break the lines. So I can just use this as an inverted effect and then use a mask to erase bits and pieces of the actual line so it feels like it's a bit more random. So yeah, that's why I kept this one. But yeah, let me just show you how I set that one up. We have the render ready, and if I go to the filters, it's gonna enable some. I don't remember where I have them, but here is one. So you can see is another one. We might have to just build it from scratch because I lost it.
So where is BPR filters even in the default UI? Is it under render?
Render palette and BPR filters. The thing with the BPR filters is that they're dependent on the render passes that you have. So meaning that in the render passes here, right? Or sorry, render properties, by default, I have the shadows, transparent, and flatten enabled. But if I want to make really good use of the BPR filters, I might want to enable ambient occlusion. I might want to enable fog maybe, or SSS maybe.
Yeah, so the BPR filters are happening post render. Like you make the render and then now it's manipulating that image but maybe using the 3D information underneath.
That's exactly what they are. It's just like post processing. Yeah. But yeah, since I enable shadows and occlusion, now I can apply the filters based on those properties. Yeah, if I enable, let's say this one, and let's just do color. So by the way, you enable them by just clicking on this dot here, and then you click on the filter stuff. And you have a bunch of stuff. Let's do overpaint color. And actually, this is something that you can use for...
So are these presets?
Those are filters. There's no presets. I mean, you can click on the lightbox and get presets and then manipulate them. One of the filters that I start with is noise to break the line a little bit. What is happening right now is just basically if you have a noise or grunge image in Photoshop, you just put it on top and overlay it. You know, in this case, use the screen blending mode or whatever. That's all ZBrush is doing at the moment. But because we have all these render passes and these properties, we can tell ZBrush, all right, take this noise effect and limit it to the outline, right? To the mask or alpha. So that's why you take this mask, set it to 1, and now it's only applied to the mesh or whatever you have in the alpha. And vice versa, if you set it to -1, it's only applying to the background.
Oh, then you can do it only in the shadows. Okay, yeah, cool.
You can limit it to the shadows. You can just go, okay, let's take shadow all the way, right? So now you have this nice mist, you know, like the printing is not great, right? And then you can change the radius of the noise. If you increase it too much, it just blurs the effect, but you can also change the type of noise. So right now it's normal Gaussian, but you can change it to sharp, and that way you can go a little bit higher. So that's one way to do it, which is pretty cool. And obviously, if you don't set it to 1, you set it to 0.2, it's kind of like a blend, like an opacity between noise in the shadow and the rest. You can also do limited based on the color. So that's why I had polypaint as well. So you can just click on this range, or let's just keep it simple. Just drag it into black color, and then limited based on the intensity, right? So if you have multiple colors, right, yellow, just drag it into the yellow, and then just say RGB intensity. That's what I want to filter by. So that's another way to do it that is pretty powerful when you have polypaint. Generally speaking, what I do is set this to be a mask like so, and the shadows, not all the way, but something like that. And notice that I have the noise set to 100. That's just so I can see the effect, and then I can just knock it down a bit. Okay. And it's all about the subtlety.
Yeah, nice.
So
nice. Definitely.
This filter, you know, it's pretty subtle, and you won't see much change. Another cool one, before we get to the hatching thing, is let's enable 2. Right, I'm gonna click on blur, and I'm gonna use this outline edge, and that should give you a bit of an outline, right? So you see now I have like these sharper areas here.
Oh yeah, it's like nice and sharp and clean. It's like it's small.
Yeah, it's a small change, but it sort of cleans, let's say, areas like here, and you know the actual outline.
Did it affect the interior too?
No, this one is just doing the outline, but you can change all of that. So I'm gonna set it to -100 just to make it pretty intense. And within the modifiers here, you can change from exterior cavity to interior cavity and so on. And just add a little bit of noise. You can change the thickness of the outline as well. It's going to be more evident if I change the fall off as well. So this is how you can start breaking that line and make it more like a realistic inky thing.
That's kind of cool. So yeah, kind of what we're showing here, like right there was using the 3D. It was using Fresnel, kind of looks like. Is there anything in here that would actually like distort the ink lines, like to make them, to change their shape?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do all of that. Before I do that, let's do the pattern or the hash pattern first, and then we'll distort the outlines. So
Yeah, let's do that.
just so that you
Cool.
kind of like know how I did that. I create a couple of tileable textures. So this is one,
Ooh.
just pretty simple, and this is another one,
Ah.
right? But they are tileable. This one right here is what you can see tiling across in all this area, plus all the distortion. So that's the detailing part. So that pattern. And the cool thing in ZBrush is, or in the filters, is that you can load those as overlays and define how they're going to look.
What you just showed were those two patterns that we saw earlier.
Yeah, the two render passes with those patterns. You can set up a filter that has everything that the way you want it with that pattern, save it, and then you can try it out by just loading and changing the texture and see which patterns work better. And all you have to do really is go to a new filter and select texture overlay, and that basically overlays a texture. Nothing's happening right now because you have to load it in here. So I'm gonna click on this filter texture map, click on import. All right, I'm gonna load the dots because that's the one that I end up using, and here it is. That's what the overlay does. So it doesn't look too exciting at the moment. Let's turn the rest of them off so that you can see. And yeah, so the overlay texture, the value 50 is just the size of it. So you can decrease it or increase it by reducing the number. It's assuming that black is transparent. So that's why it looks a bit weird, but we'll change that. First, what I do is just determine the size of the dots in here. You can actually change the colors of that input image here, or like affecting the overlay colors like that. So, yeah, this is just an overlay of the color. Anyway, the cool thing happens once you establish the size and all of that, and then you decide where you want to place those dots.
And you did it in the Fresnel or the shadows or something?
I use Fresnel and shadow and mask a little bit as well. So let's say mask at 1 so that it only applies to the model. Fresnel and shadow a tiny bit. So the cool thing about as well these modifiers is that everything that is here on the right hand side is to amplify the effect on the left. So you have Fresnel exponent in here, so you can just increase that and really push that closer to the edge, or vice versa, right? But the best thing for this is in the modifiers for this type of stuff. The base orientation right now is not gonna make a difference. Again, I'll show you why in a second. But if I change the base orientation, it's like taking the entire texture and rotating it around. That's all it's doing, or like the dot pattern. So it's just rotating it. And this orientation count works better if you have actual shading in the model, but I don't have any. So basically, if I were to select another material and render it again, that's when those things come up, right? So this is orientation of 1. If I click on 2 or 3, let's go for 9. So closer to kind of like the edges where ZBrush finds there is like a difference between the shading, like highlights or dark areas of that shading, is going to change the orientation of those dots. So that's one way to do it. The other cool thing you can do is you don't actually have to, like I can render my piece with this material, but you can actually use a filter to render or to bring in the material that you want. So, and if you click on filter and go to material shading, that allows you to select any material, like pause render material. I can select my comic and then I have it in there, 100%, right? So this is the same thing. It's not the actual material. You can change to anything. And then you can blend this material. You can say, this material, I only want that in the Fresnel, right, to create like random stuff, and then start adding things on top of that. The other thing to keep in mind is that these filters work in a hierarchy. So I might just take this one and go copy and paste it in here so that it goes after this material. It's largely playing around with the settings. It's not like a specific formula. But what was the other thing that we were chatting about that I was going to show you?
Oh, displace I'd like to see.
Oh yeah. So let's just keep it simple. All right, so we have some lines. I'm going to use displacement or displace, this one right here in filter 7. And yeah, that basically explodes the line. The value here in the displace is the amount of displacement. So 0 is nothing, right? 2 or 3 starts to break things apart. So you can do that to add noise to the line. And if you use the mask, it will limit it to the kind of like the inside or the other way around. So you can use 1 to kind of like create that sort of fizzy look of the outline, and then add another filter that has the effect inside. The way that I like to use this one though is I like to change the radius, so it just changes the noise size of that displacement. So it just makes it like a squiggly line like that.
There you go.
I'm gonna exaggerate things just to make it cool.
Yeah, this is cool. This is kind of what I was hoping for. This is awesome because then you can just add a little bit of imperfection so it doesn't look 3D.
Yeah, so the radius will determine kind of like the frequency, the size of that effect, that noise, and the displacement is how much of it. So this one will be obviously kind of like a glass type of thing. I don't know.
Oh wow.
Not useful in this case.
Psychedelic.
And the best part though about this is that you can play with the opacity. So the opacity will blend the effect of the filter on top of the previous line, so on top of this one. So if I reduce the opacity, you can kind of see like a double line almost. I don't know if you can see that.
You could kind of make it look like there was a sketchy line and then a clean line on top.
Yeah, so I'm going to exaggerate that a bit more.
Yeah, cool. You get extra lines for free.
Yeah, so you have that squiggly line thing. Let's increase the radius. And you can also determine you could say, I did the sketch with a blue pen and then I just inked on top.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of it's experimentation, which is fun, but you're getting a lot of the look from the material and then the sculpt, really, like doing those things in tandem and then using the filters just kind of like, finesse it and add that post-processing. But I mean, being able to distort just the lines, being able to use the Fresnel, it is actually an advantage over using Photoshop because you'd have to like bring in extra passes and then like to do a Fresnel, for instance, that would be very hard to do. There is some real advantages to doing kind of what you're doing here.
Yeah, lots.
It's faster. Yeah.
Not only that, it's like, let's say I like this displacement, I can also add a sharpen just to sharpen that line even more. But like this is quite a bit. But the cool thing obviously is that once you have your preset ready, if you just rotate around, you still are in this sculpting mode and the material is happening at render time and you go, you know what, I like this new angle a bit more and let's just do a render.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. That's the best demo because I've done post-process stuff in Photoshop and if you want another angle, you're just so sad that you have to do a lot of things again if you do any custom mask painting or anything. But here you could just render a bunch of different angles or do a turntable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can do a render, and then once you have the render with the filters, a turntable would just work just fine with all the filters. I would say if I had to break it down without taking the sculpting part in consideration, the material is 85%. Then you have another 10% in filters, and then the last 5% is in Photoshop, putting it all together and just combining the final image. Yeah. Right. So you can have this quality of like a surface and start doing those lines like that. So it just gives you like a very sharp, clean line. And this is great for these comics. So if I enable my comic material, I can just go and do this type of stuff, right?
Nice.
Yeah. So that one looks pretty sharp, but if you want to do something that's not as sharp or that looks more like sketchy, you can use, let's say, the standard brush or even the /3. So you can get a pretty clean cut just with the /3. And to achieve those broken lines, what you can do is enable Sculptress Pro, right? But then change the stroke functions of it. So like the modifiers of Sculptress Pro. Right, so you can change the subdivide ratio and the undivide ratio. So with adaptive, you get this. Without adaptive, you get this. So now I can do lines that look sketchy, like this. And then,
Crazy.
And this is the point of this tip, right? Is I would do this at this stage when I have everything ready and the base is ready, and I can see things with the comic matcap. Because if I change this to the basic one, it will look like this. It looks horrible. Yeah. So I would only do this probably in a separate layer. Like I would record a sculpting layer, and actually I don't know if the sculpting layer would work with this, but with a morph target or something. That is just how I did those lines to get them get them closer to this kind of like pencil style. If you don't like this Sculptress Pro and you don't want to modify the mesh too much, you can create your own custom brushes for it and have like a hatch effect. So I have these comic ones to create this. This is a sharp ink thing. So just with color. So I'm just literally painting those hatch things. Cool. So it's just poly paint. That's another option. So this is the Moebius type of noise thing that I sometimes add, and it's sculpted. So I just let's say if I go around these lines, I will just shade it. But this is sculpting the mesh, right? So that's adding tiny little pores, and that's kind of like a cool way to generate some shading But yeah, don't go too crazy with it. And then you can use the smooth brush to clean it up and variate it a little bit. A couple of extra tips in there to refine the final look of it.
Sweet. I never would have thought about using Sculpt. I don't even use Sculptures Pro, but that's cool that because you're making the mesh jank. It's making like sketchy line for you.
But yeah, that's it. That's a rundown of like that final illustration and the process really.
Yeah, thank you, dude. I mean, yeah, I that's a lot
to process.
I have such a clear picture now, and no, I think I get it. Honestly, I think I get it. I mean, the matte cap stuff, I would have to like play around with it, but it looks super fun. Like getting it set up and then playing around with that would be all the fun. But seeing like the things you're changing,
yeah,
and seeing how much goes into the sculpt, gives me a lot more insight and understanding on how you do it. So. Yeah, thank you for all that, man. So why don't you tell the people like some of the stuff you got going on, and this work that you did was like a part of something that you recorded, and like you've got so many websites that you founded. So yeah, why don't you tell the people where they can learn more?
You pretty much mentioned everything really. Like if you go to Pablanda, which is my kind of like handle online, pablanda.com is ultimately a link, like a hub to all the things. So you can see more of my work, like my NFT gallery. You can go to the 3D Concept Artists Academy, the Zbrush guides, and the 3D snippets, and probably store is what you might be interested in. So the 3D Concept Artists website is basically my academy where I can teach, and I have my courses online. I have free workshops and resources. So if you go to the courses one, or to this tab, there is one that we've been kind of like mentioning, this one right here, the Zbrush for Illustrators intensive course is like a 5-day course, pretty intense, but we create that entire illustration. So if you're interested in this type of stylization and this style of render in Zbrush, you can go here, and that basically gives you a general idea of how I go about it.
It's good because it says intensive course in all caps. That's how you know it's really good.
Yeah, this is an intensive course, and that's how you know it's good. Again, I try to create a render and illustration and make it look like it's the cover of a graphic novel. All of this is Zbrush. Even these bits and pieces are fiber mesh, which are mesh look awesome with the comic markup. You can create grass and all of these things with the polyframe. By the way, you can just produce like masks and stuff, and then separate them in the composition. Anyway, that's part of what I cover in the course, and that's how I did these bits and pieces. But everything is Zbrush. This is the outline. This is how it looks in Zbrush, just what I've been showing you. And yeah, these are all the different passes, and these are done with filters. So in that course, I actually build like step by step these type of filters. And I think in the resources, you can also grab them. It's kind of like a halftone pattern, and this is literally a Zbrush NPR filter. This is another type of filter. So all of this is just to show that you can achieve this quality of, let's say, the line, everything that you see here. That's just a simple NPR filter from Zbrush. Anyway, just to wrap it up, if you're interested, that's in the 3D Concept Artist. That's where I have most of my courses. It'll tell you here anyway. So yeah, in-depth courses and specialized workshops, that's 3D Concept. Zbrush guides, here you find lots of different free tutorials, resources, all of that related to Zbrush or not, productivity tips, that sort of thing. This is just the Zbrush Guides store, so where you can get all the brushes, materials. There are a lot of free stuff as well. So if you filter by ebooks, this is the one that Jay was mentioning at the beginning. This one right here.
Mm-hmm.
A guide to Zbrush comic style guide render.
There it is.
If you want to download it and want to get into the nitty-gritty of the behind the scenes of how I created that material, is all there. The 3D snippets, this is kind of like my monthly projects. And this one is kind of like being a fly on the wall when I just do stuff, and you can subscribe and keep an eye on the projects that I'm working, and I do lots of different things. This is kind of like my testing ground, my lab. So last month I tested photogrammetry, which I've never done before. So I did like this concept with that. Before that, we did the shaman creature. A lot of experimentation, but it's pretty cool. And yeah, that's it. That's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, dude.
No worries, man.
I really appreciate you coming on. And yeah, like I say, if you out there aren't aware already, go check out his website and YouTube. He's teaching all the time. Like I say, he's on the official Zbrush YouTube. So yeah, man, thanks again for coming on and sharing with me how to do some of this stuff. I definitely have to do a graphic thing sometime soon. I just think it looks so cool.
For sure, man.
And yeah, that's it for this one, dude. Thank you for being on the inaugural episode, man. Hopefully
Awesome.
this can be a series where I get to talk to talented people like you.
Sweet. No, I'm happy to help, happy to be here, and let's do this whenever you want again. It's pretty fun to just talk shop and and show a little bit of the behind the scenes of my stuff.
Absolutely. Great. Well, it was fun for me too. All right, man. Well, thanks, dude, and thank you, people, for watching.
All right, take it easy. Thank you. Bye.